Welcome to Shapers of the Snow, a show dedicated to the small independent builders handcrafting skis and snowboards around the world. We sit down with the shapers to hear how they got started, the art behind their craft, the real challenges they face, and what continues to fuel their passion for creating shapes for the snow. Grab a beer or a coffee, and let's get on with the show. Hello everyone, and welcome to Shapers of the Snow. I'm Josh. We're talking with Max from
MTN Local Snowboards.
And how you doing, Max?
Good. I'd be more excited if it was snowing, but it's pretty hot here in Vermont right now.
How about a little introduction, how you got into snowboarding and how you eventually started making your own gear, that timeline?
Okay, so I started snowboarding in the 1980s. One of my friends had a Burton Performer, one of the wood. The Backhill was the big board back then. The Performer was sort of the next sort of addition. It was a red with natural wood finish. At the time, the resorts didn't allow snowboarding, so you had to go places and get certified. I was living in Massachusetts at the time. I had a friend who had this board. We would hike in the woods, basically any sort of area that you could hike and ride. Back then, those boards didn't turn very well either, so it was sort of like a straight shot because they had metal fins on them. So there was a massive hill sort of up in the woods near our houses, and we would go hike and take a bunch of runs. Since then, snowboarding has been sort of the baseline in my life, so I've always been snowboarding since then. I've made a point of getting to the mountain every winter and snowboarding. At the time, I think my mother thought it was a fad and, oh, I'll take them to the mountain. Like once they started allowing snowboarding, and I never got over it. It's one of those things where it's been a constant in my life since then. I moved to Vermont in I guess it was the end of, I think it was the winter of 2000. My wife and I moved to Vermont, and I worked for the Big B for 9 years in warranty. Basically got a different perspective of snowboarding that I had never had before. I had never realized how much stuff broke. I had never broken any boards. So it definitely gave me a durability sort of perspective on what fails.
So you got some inside information on failure points on board and gear?
Yeah, I mean, basically, we saw the whole spectrum of what they were selling and tried to see, when there were trends in damage. Lots of issues came up, and so we would make suggestions on how we could improve product. We'd meet with product managers and talk to them about our ideas of, hey, maybe do this, or maybe the binding base plate was causing a crack in a specific place close to the binding. You would make suggestions to improve the product. So that was always a key thing. So my brain was in tune with thinking about improvements. I basically, after then, I started experimenting myself, making POW surfers. I started wood lamination. The boards that I build are horizontally laminated, so it's not a traditional core situation. It's laminated like a skateboard. I did a lot of research online, and I tried to figure out materials that were readily available. I didn't need to use a lot of equipment. At the time, I didn't have any equipment, so I was trying to figure out low budget experimental kind of stuff. So I figured I could get small. I started using skateboard veneer because it was small. I could buy, I think the company Roar Rocket in Canada sold vacuum bags set up, and I started making skateboard laminated decks, pow surf, super small stuff. So I got a like really basic vacuum bag that you like hand pump, messed around with wood lamination with just wood glue. So I basically took the vacuum bag, strapped it to my dining room table, put a 2x4 under the nose to get a nose radius, sort of an upturned tail, clamped it to the table and left it overnight. It was horrible, but it's sort of amusing. Like it's definitely sort of an aha moment. You're like, oh, I can actually create something pretty easily. Then I had seen like people had taken like 2x10s and cut profile shape into them to make your snowboard press mold. So you'd have a male and a female, and then you'd put the vacuum bag between them and you'd clamp it together. So I did that. The vacuum bag stuff, you definitely didn't get a lot of pressure. I kept wanting more pressure, so I tried like that setup with pipe clamps, because each pipe clamp ends up adding another 600 pounds of pressure. I think like a vacuum bag is like a couple 100 pounds. I kept adding more pipe clamps, and then I made a metal sheet that I put in to try to get it so that it was consistently flat. And then I was just like, I keep experimenting and it's working, but not quite. The result wasn't amazing. So then I was like, I just need to go for it. I'm a welder. I went to welding school. I'm experienced with steel. I went to a metal supplier in Burlington. I bought a bunch of I-beams. I bought all the materials to make a press. I basically was like, I'm just going to go for it. I was all in. I designed a press. I built it from scratch. The truck showed up on my street. The driver asked me if I had a forklift. I was like, look around. I'm in a residential neighborhood. I don't have a forklift. So we rolled these like 9-foot I-beams that were each, 600 pounds off the truck into my front yard. I had rented a pallet jack. I like wheeled them up my driveway. I had rented a mag drill. I drilled all the holes. I had bought all the bolts. I put the thing together. I had an electrician come and wire it. It was wired completely wrong. So it didn't do what I wanted it to do, which then took a little bit more research. I had a friend come and wire it properly. I had ordered like custom heat blankets and all the stuff to make it a production press. The press is like 2,000 pounds of steel. It took me like 3 months of solid work to get it right, but once it was done, it worked. I pressed a board. I'd actually vacuum bagged my first board with sample materials, which spurred me to build the actual press, because I think at the time the veneer I had was like, I think it was 48 inches. I'd basically bought longboard veneer because I figured that would be closer to a snowboard size. That really equates to like a 122, which is a kid's board. so so I built a really wide like kids board, but it had edges, it had inserts, it was really ugly, but it was together. I went to there's a mountain locally, Bolton Valley. I went there, got on the lift, got off the lift. On the ride up, I was convinced I was going to die the minute I got on this board. But once it hit snow and I was able to make some turns, I was like, holy crap, I cannot believe it. I can actually carve a 122. sizing theory and all that stuff was just like completely out the window. It blew my mind. So it was really cool. It was definitely amazing. I was like, okay, now I know that I can make this. I just need to make it in the right size. So my thought was to make like downsized boards. I use a lot of taper. So, they're directional, wide nose, narrow tail. I'm a huge fan of swallowtails, have been forever. So I try to add a swallowtail whenever I can. Customers definitely sort of dictate what they want, and I'm happy to build what they want. I just don't make popsicle sticks. I try to stay away from round, like rounded tips and tails. I like really abrupt, sort of angular or square noses, tails, swallowtails, obviously. Something that's not going to look like anything that's on the rack at the mountain. I wanted it to be something that stood out. People are like, what the hell is that? Basically a conversation starter. People would always ask, like on the lift, like, tell me about your board. What are you riding? Who is that? Who makes that? And then it just sort of snowballed. I basically started making prototypes. I just kept making prototypes. Basically, the conversations that I had on the lift spurred sales. So I would work on my elevator pitch literally with people on the lift. So people would like ask me, oh, can I ride with you? Or do you have a board I can try out? So I would bring a couple extra boards with me to the mountain. If somebody wanted to demo something, I would do that. At that point, I had been at Bolton for a while, and so that became my sort of testing ground for all my boards. I'm very East Coast driven. Pretty much if you can ride East Coast, icy, cold, firm conditions, I feel like you can ride pretty much anywhere. So I wanted to build a board that had a really good radial side cut. I wanted a board that was a carving machine, basically, but it was also a powder shape. So this was like pre-Karua. At the time, the board did not exist. I guess in the 90s, I was riding Alpine in hard boots. So I wanted that precise sort of carving, being on edge, super G turns, precision riding, but also to be able to transition from hard pack to like woods or powder or whatever without having to like swap boards. Most of the boards, the designs, they look like powder shapes, but they have a really good side cut. So they hold and grip really. It literally just kept feeding itself, and I was like, I want to make the next one better, and I want to make the next one better, and I came up with a bunch of shapes, and then I tested those shapes, and then those shapes made me think of other shapes, and then I basically created a website that has like a board builder on it, so you can swap tip and tail shapes. All of the tip and tail shapes that are on my website, I've made iterations of and basically have just kept refining them. I also wanted to make like a sort of eco-friendly, low plastic, basically the only plastic in the construction is the base. I'm using tree length veneer, so each piece of veneer is full length. So basically the whole board is the core. I don't profile, so typically in snowboard construction, the core has been CNC'd, so it wafers down to the tip and tail, which ends up A good example is when you see videos of Jeremy Jones on his Storm Chaser. He slows down the carve and you can see the tip and tail like chatter. It reduces the weight of the board, but it makes that chatter when you're riding. So what I found out is by not profiling, the board is the same thickness tip to tail, but that translates into dampening. So it's very damp. It's only slightly heavier than a stock production board, and it's really stable, especially at high speed where you want it to be stable. You cut through chop, like mixed conditions, chunks of ice and all that stuff that would normally throw you with like a traditional board. You just plow through it.
Yeah, I got a question here. Usually, tip and tail are about 2 to 3 millimeter thick,
Yeah.
and center is 6 to 9. So what are you running, like tip and tail thickness then?
It's the same thickness of the board. I mean, I don't know what it is in millimeters. I mean, it's probably less, a little bit less than half an inch thick. I know that sounds crazy, but because you have solid pieces of veneer, they flex like a tree swaying in the wind. Consistent flex tip to tail. You end up with this natural wood flex. So that helps with stability. Again, it's not, because I'm not profiling, it seems like it would be very heavy. I would say it's more like 3/8, not half an inch. Half an inch is pretty thick. So it's basically the layers are comprised of your base with edges, a layer of fiberglass, a couple layers of veneer, fiberglass again, and then the top sheet. So the top sheet is actual all wood. It's all one piece. In describing it, it sounds like a plank, but it really isn't. I definitely use all sorts of composites. Typically I use triaxial fiberglass. I do make women's boards with triax and biax, carbon fiber. I have a customer in Vermont who's got a size 15 boot. I made him a massive board that had a carbon Kevlar custom setup. He likes to ride fast and he wants stiff. Yeah, the customer sort of dictates the materials. They may request crazy stuff, but with feet that big, there's a lot of leverage to the edge. It definitely dictated a lot of crazy materials.
I imagine. And how wide was the board? Waist width?
That board, that was the biggest board I've ever made. It was a typical board that I make is usually maxing out the width of the base material. So, it's usually 330 millimeters wide. I had to get special base material. I want to say the tip on that board was a 354, which is huge. It's almost 15 inches wide. I want to say the tail was 300 and the waist was like 310. No, that's not right.
All the way around?
Yeah, I think the tail was 310 and the waist was 300.
Yeah, it's a massive board. What was the length?
It was a 160. I think it was 354. The tail was 320 and the waist was like 310. He had been riding a Lib skunk ape and was complaining about his toes dragging and basically booting out when he was carving. So we did a width comparison of the boards base to base, and the board that I built him was 3/4 of an inch wider at the tip on both sides of his skunk ape. Like, it was big.
Yeah, probably no more toe dragging with that big board you made.
Nope. definitely not.
So happy customer.
Yeah, very, very happy. Yeah. So depending on the requirements of the customer, that sort of dictates what composites I use, figuring out the flex, trying to get an idea of what the customer currently rides so that the specifications are similar but not the same. So basically I can say, okay, this customer is riding this particular board. I'm going to make my specifications closer to that so it doesn't feel like they're riding going from apples to oranges. That way it's an apple of a different shape, basically.
Customers that can create their own artwork too, or do you work with them to create custom top sheets?
Yes and no. I definitely try to get inspiration from the customer. I don't, I generally will do artwork or stain or paint or whatever. I try not to get into super elaborate artwork, but I have started laser engraving. I do have a customer who's an artist. I took one of his drawings and actually laser engraved the actual drawing onto the top sheet, and it came out amazing. So the artwork is exactly what's on his board, and it's not going to wear off. Where if you hit something and paint is scraped, you have an empty spot on your board. With the laser engraving, it's actually, you know, in the board so it can't disappear, which is nice. And the thing that I've noticed is, I can laser engrave a logo, and then when snow packs into it, it changes color, which is sort of cool. So you have that negative space when you're looking at it, but then during the winter, it actually fills in and it changes what it looks like, which is pretty cool.
Kind of laser engraver are you using? Are you using like the kind of portable ones or like a big stationary one?
Yeah, it's a portable. I don't have a ton of space. I'm basically building out of my garage, and I liken my garage to the trash compactor in Star Wars where the walls are closing in. So it's definitely, I could use more space for sure.
How many boards have you made in the garage?
Oh, hundreds.
Hundreds.
Yeah, like I've built a lot of boards.
Yeah, I saw the Cabot line. There was a bunch of boards for that.
Yeah, there were like 30 boards for that one. Yeah, so basically, I started my first prototype the winter of 2015, and then I started selling boards in 2016. So it's been a decade. Yeah, so it's become the boards are higher end now that I've refined my designs. It's still website and word of mouth. I definitely have more of a reputation now because of people seeing the stuff. They're definitely not normal looking boards. So it's definitely, it's not going to blend in very well with everybody else's boards. So you can definitely see them.
Yeah, you can. Yours have the look to them are very handcrafted and unique looking. I saw the laser stuff. That looks great. Then you have looks like hand painted, stained. It's not your average snowboard you see on like in a shop. You look at that board, you're like, oh yeah, that's definitely handmade.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely handcrafted, and I thank you. I want it to be one of a kind. Every board that I make is one of a kind, and so you know your next door neighbor is not going to have the same board. Even if I make the same shape, I don't like copy boards, so they're never they're never the same. The nice thing also is even if the shapes are the same, the wood grain is always different. Like every slice of veneer has different patterns. Even if you wanted to copy it, it can't look the same. Epoxy bleeds through the veneer differently. So you may have spots that, you know, one piece to the next piece of veneer wouldn't have. So it makes it really like a fingerprint. I mean, it's very custom in that aspect, which is nice.
kind of like each board is its own personality. And then
Yeah.
people will be like, I have this one, and I have that one, but it could be the same board, but they look drastically different.
Yeah.
You work with Cabot. I remember a couple years ago, I followed Darn Tough. You did a collaboration with them too, looks like.
Yep.
How do you end up working with Cabot and Darn Tough?
So I had friends that were doing a project with Cabot. They had suggested that, and that's sort of how that happened. And then with the Darn Tough, I had a friend that I had worked with who then started working at Darn Tough, and I had talked to him about something, and he had suggested me making a board for the owner, and then we ended up building another board similar but not the same. It was two boards that had the same graphic, but they were different shapes, and then one was raffled. And at the time, I think it was the biggest post that Darn Tough had ever had. People went crazy. Yeah, it was very interesting.
Yeah, they have a huge following, so yeah, it makes a lot of sense. They make ski and snowboard socks, so I can see why that one. You make cool boards, and that they make that post, and everyone's probably like, "What?"
Yeah, so the perk of Mountain Local is you get a pair of Darn Tough socks with your board. That was sort of my thought, is that I could help create snowboarding customers. With every board, I give a pair of Darn Tough socks.
Then with all the Cabot boards, what happened with those? Were those a raffle too?
Yeah, I think they went to, at the time, Cabot had locations, so you could go to stores and buy Cabot products. They had some specific Cabot locations. I know that a bunch of the boards went to, friends or employees or whatever. So a lot of it was giveaway. But all those boards, similar graphic. The tail had like a Cabot plaid printed on it. I screen printed a graphic on the tail, and then it had sort of a Mountain Local Cabot collab design in between the bindings. And then each out of those boards, they were all completely different shapes. The color and the graphic were the same, but everything else was different.
That's pretty unique. I saw that photo, and it's pretty impressive. I'm like, that's a lot of boards.
Yeah, it was crazy. In addition to the snowboard stuff, I've been making skateboards for a couple of years. There's another company in Vermont called Beta Technologies. They make a vertical takeoff and landing plane that's electric. It's all manufactured in Vermont. I built 200 skateboards for them. So they hired a local artist. We printed the graphics. I hand shaped like cruiser decks and longboards for them. And those were given to employees, or I think employees may have purchased them. I went there and helped set them up. So we built 200 skateboards. It was crazy.
In one day or multiple days.
It was multiple days. Like, yeah, we got most of it done one day, but I mean, it was, you had to grip all the decks and then put all the hardware on. So it was crazy. There were like 20 people helping, and it took a long time.
Yeah, it takes a while to set up a skateboard.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that you have off-season boards.
Yeah. So I was like, what can I do during the summer that's, board related? It stays core to snowboarding. They're close cousins. A lot of, skaters snowboard and a lot of snowboarders skate. So it made sense to do that. So I was trying to think of a cool name for a skateboard company, and because it's the off season, that's how it came to Off Season Skateboards.
Very fitting name for a snowboard brand for having a off-brand skateboard brand.
And I'm staying within the realm of horizontal lamination, which I understand very well at this point. I built my own skateboard presses as well. So I wanted to be sure that I was making my own equipment. So if there was a problem, I knew how to fix it. I also don't outsource. So like with the snowboard tuning, I have like grind right equipment so I can tune all my stuff in house. That's complete. When I ship a board to a customer, it's ready to go.
Yeah, it's been like your hands only, and you know everything about it.
Yeah. Absolute quality control the whole time. And then I can tune it, have it race tuned, ready to go. So it's super sharp and they can just put their bindings on and go.
And do you like detune any bit, or you just leave it sharp all the way down?
No, I definitely detune tip and tail. I use pearl wax. I have used many other waxes. I've had really good experience with pearl wax. So I exclusively use pearl wax. I had an opportunity that Mikey Franco told me he had graphite base material they were ordering from Isosport. So I jumped on that. So I bought a roll because they were importing it a couple years ago. That's major. I know that he isn't doing that now because the import was insane. Like the cost of importing each roll is 100 pounds. So when you're ordering 6 rolls, that's a lot of weight and freight cost. Hopefully I'll get in on the next order with the domestic the domestic product.
Now, how is that compared to Crown Plastics?
Well, I've been using Crown Plastics since the beginning. I think they worked with Crown to formulate a graphite base to their specs. Franco definitely has the budget to be able to do that kind of stuff with his aerospace materials, but I also trust his mechanical intuition. So whatever they've designed with Crown is going to be premier material. The Isosport material is amazing. It's World Cup graphite base material. They make 3 versions. It's temperature specific. So normally like base material is like what you get is sort of universal, but with this particular graphite material, it's their version of universal, but they also make a warm weather and a cold weather base. So say like Michaela Schifrin has 3 pairs of skis. They'll all have different bases and they're waxed to the conditions. They look identical, but they perform completely differently. So definitely upper echelon material. It's so fast. It's like ball bearings.
Huh. I never knew they made specialty bases for temperature.
Yeah, it's crazy.
That is. That also makes sense for racing. You want to have the highest performance you can get, and
Yeah,
having things made for certain temperatures makes a lot of sense.
yeah.
I saw also on your website you make split board stabilizer bar. Do you
Yes.
guys make that in house or do you have that outsourced? What was the reason behind developing that stabilizing bar?
So I had seen a mass produced version and it was one size. And so I make it custom to everybody's setup. So the customers that purchase it give me their touring bracket dimensions because every snowboard manufacturer, the touring bracket location is completely different. Yes, it's in the center of the board at the balance point, but the width varies from board to board, size to size. So it's never in the same place. So I found that the length, you couldn't just make one size because if it's on a really wide board, it's going to be too narrow. And if it's on a really narrow board, it's going to be too long. And it shouldn't stick out and grab stuff while you're riding. So I was like, oh, I can make these custom and then it's specific to a person's setup because every split board is set up differently. At the time, I was using the Spark touring bracket, so I knew the dimensions of the hole so I could get the rod material for that. I made a couple and then I was like, oh, I should really make them to order. That way I'm not sitting on inventory. So pretty much everything I do is made to order, regardless of what I make. If it's a skateboard, if it's a stabilizer bar, if it's a snowboard, it's always made to order. If I'm printing a t-shirt, same thing.
Made to order. Yeah, you don't have much room in the garage to have a like warehouse.
Yeah, and then I'm not sitting on inventory because that's a big problem too. Like you don't want to be stockpiling like weird sizes of things. It's difficult in the sense of business where people want something now. Hey, I want this board. Do you have it? No, I can make it for you. Most people don't want to wait for that stuff. So the real customers will wait because they know that it's being made for them specifically, not, oh, I've produced these things and I'm just taking it off the shelf. I try to tailor it to the customer that's requesting it, regardless of the product. So that's sort of where that stabilizer bar idea came from. I was making it for Spark only, and then I had some customers that were using Union. I think it was like the Explorer, something like that, Expedition. Now they've gone to like a pinless system, so it's a little different. Yeah, I've tried to make it for different setups. The Karakoram setup is a little different, and I didn't get into making a stabilizer for that.
But it sounds like you have the major ones covered.
Yep, for sure.
Then speaking of touring, you have the switchboard.
Yes,
I saw that. Then is that just for touring uphill with and having the snowboard on your back? Then to get to the top.
exactly. So right when COVID happened, I was trying to figure out a way that my customers that didn't want to purchase a split could take what they owned because everybody wanted to get outside. When COVID hit, the split board market exploded. There was no, I mean, it's sort of like what happened to mountain bikes, but like there was no equipment available. So I was like in a prime place because I wasn't outsourcing. I could do the whole thing. So I was trying to figure out a way that I could sell a product to a customer that wanted to split board but didn't have the funds to buy a split board and also not have to like have them test a split board because that's really the only time you're able to ride a split. So a lot of people will purchase a split off of reputation. That may not be the best scenario. Like you should really try to ride the product before you purchase it because it's really expensive. It's cost prohibitive a lot of the time, and you may get a split board you really don't like. So I figured, this would be the opportunity to try building a product that I could make that could get somebody up the mountain without having to buy, it would be the cost of another snowboard, but it wasn't, triple the cost that would be a split. And it would function like a split in the sense that you could tour up, stow them in your pack, take the bindings and ride down on your board like you would on a split board.
No, it's a good idea. Kind of allow people to have different options to get up the hill.
Yeah,
They find people liked them.
I did. And then I talked to someone at Union, and Union's like, we really like the idea. We're going to go to market with this. Sorry.
Yeah.
They're like, well, we can still be friends, or you can never speak to us again if you don't want to. I was like, I'm fine with, you know, maintaining the relationship. I mean, it sucks, but I feel like I can say that I've been credited for that situation. So yeah, they saw my prototype and were like, "Oh, we're just gonna go to market like next month." It's like awesome. There go my sales.
Well, you got the credit.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, winding down questions here.
Yep.
Getting towards the end. Any designs or shapes or like ideas that you're working on right now for future boards, or are you kind of like locked in with what you've been working on?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always trying to think of new shapes. I definitely have like a collection of older boards from 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s. So I, look at older shapes and am inspired by older designs that were really sort of iconic. Take inspiration from that, like swallowtail, like winter stick swallowtails, like that kind of. Sims had really abrupt shapes. Yeah, there are a lot of different companies that made funky stuff. I definitely try to think about that in designing a board. So I'm constantly thinking about shapes and new shapes and how I can adjust the shape to have a good side cut. Yeah, so I have like tons of sketches of all sorts of weird stuff. I've definitely been sort of stuck on a board for the last couple seasons that I keep refining. Called it the ultimate, sort of a throwback name to like an old Sims swallowtail from the late 80s, early 90s. I feel like it's really an ultimate in condition handling. So I've made a couple of that particular shape. So there are a bunch of customers that have a similar shape but different designs. I'm constantly refining shapes that work to make them better. That I would say that's where I'm at the moment. I definitely am working on evolving shapes too. So
So it's an ongoing process and never stops.
yeah, always something new.
No, that's awesome. We're always improving and exploring at the same time. Sounds like
Yeah.
this is kind of the end of the interview. The kind of rapid fire questions. Is there a favorite board you've ever made?
I mean, I made a couple of the first boards were probably the ones that stick out the most. Like the rugged first board is probably a good one because it's just rugged, but it performed and it's like a 122. So it's completely ridiculous. Yeah, I mean I had a friend, like, he was on skis and he was filming with his iPhone of me riding this board, and it was, when I saw it, it was crazy. It was like I actually look like I'm riding a normal board, and then you see the board and it's teeny. So yeah.
So that board right there. Then what was the edge contact on that board?
In what sense? Like,
Point to point point to contact point. What was the edge surface that when you're on edge it was on the snow for 120? Like I'm just curious.
I mean, it was pretty much the full. I mean, it was probably, if the board was a 120, it probably had 100 centimeters.
Yeah, it's pretty small.
Yeah, very small. I mean, it was a fast turner.
Yeah. Oh, I believe it.
Yeah.
All right. Then what's your favorite place to ride?
The East Coast, I typically ride at Bolton Valley. I actually am also ski patrol there, border patrol with a BOARDER. Politically correct, border patrol. So I patrol there, Sugarbush, Smuggler's Notch, but definitely Bolton Valley. Like that's my home mountain. That's where I am all the time. They have night skiing, so you can go at night. They're pretty much open 7 days a week.
Yeah, it's one of the few places in Vermont that offers night skiing.
Yeah.
No, that's a good spot.
Great backcountry, crazy conditions all the time. Yeah, like really good snow. So it's definitely an awesome place to visit. They have a fire tower that you can climb that has a 360-degree view of the Green Mountains. It also, you can see New York State, Lake Champlain. It's sort of northwestern facing, so it's got a crazy view. The sunsets are insane. Yeah, some amazing views.
Then for future builders and people that are kind of interested in getting into it, well, what kind of advice would you have for them?
The hardest thing is taking the first step. You definitely need to experiment, know that you're going to have failures, learn from the failures, constantly learn, figure out what's going wrong, improve upon those failures, and it's just going to get better and better each time you build something. And at some point, it's going to be like, wow, this is amazing. So you can't give up. But the first step is definitely the hardest. I'm trying to think of there's like it's like teacher versus master quote. It's something along the lines of master versus student. The teacher has failed more than the student has tried. So it's basically knowing that you're going to fail and just taking that as part of the method in which you build your sort of recipe and move forward. There are definitely some dark times. I can't skirt that. You definitely have like some self-doubt and whether or not you're making the right decisions, but you sort of have to troubleshoot a lot of different things, and it definitely makes it exciting. In the moment, it can suck really bad, but that's part of the process. Like, it's just figuring it out. I've definitely had people call me and, hey, can you tell me how you do this? And it's like, my setup is totally different than the standard. I could tell you how I do it, but your setup is going to be completely different, and your neighbors is going to be different from you. And like every setup is very specific, and the recipe is based on that setup. So it's a hard answer for people that want a quick like YouTube solution. It's not going to be, okay, I have everything, now I can do it. Like it's not as easy as that. So it's just figuring it out and going for it.
No, it's great advice. Just getting that first step going, trying it is what it really takes.
Yeah, I mean, it's the entrepreneurial thing is like if you don't take that first step, it's never going to happen. So at some point you have to just like take that sort of leap of faith and see where it goes.
Yeah, totally. All right, that's everything I got for you. Appreciate you coming on.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, have a good one.
See you on snow.
Thanks for listening. I hope you all enjoyed that interview with Max from MTN Local Snowboards. And a big thanks to Max for coming onto the podcast. See you guys next time. Thanks, Snow.